The scream cut through the parking garage before the gunshot ever came. 3 armed men had a woman in a business suit trapped against a concrete pillar, and the shadows of Ashford Heights held their breath, except for one man in construction boots and a faded jacket, who moved like lightning through darkness. 8 seconds. That's all it took for Levi Armstrong to remind everyone that some men never truly leave the battlefield behind. Stay with me until the end of this story, and comment which city you're watching from. I want to see how far this tale of instinct and honor travels. This is a story about the quiet warriors among us, the ones who've traded combat boots for work boots but never forgot what it means to stand between evil and the innocent. A story about debts that transcend time, courage that defines character, and the moment when a single father's past collided with a CEO's desperate present in ways neither could have predicted. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The underground parking garage of Summit Tower smelled like oil and desperation. Thania Foster's heels clicked against concrete as she hurried toward her car, her mind still processing the board meeting that had run 3 hours past schedule. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in Ashford Heights, and the financial district had long since emptied of its daytime crowds. She noticed them too late. 3 figures emerged from behind a support pillar, their movements coordinated in a way that suggested this wasn't their first ambush. The lead man wore a black hoodie and carried a gun with the casual familiarity of someone who'd used it before. His companions flanked him, one gripping a knife, the other holding a length of chain that caught the fluorescent lighting in ugly glints. "Phone, wallet, jewelry," the lead man said, his voice flat with routine menace. "Make it quick and nobody gets hurt." Thania's hand tightened on her briefcase. Inside were documents that represented 6 months of work, confidential files for a merger that could save 300 jobs. Her phone contained access to accounts worth $40 million. And her wedding ring, the last thing her late husband had given her before the accident, was worth more than money could measure. "Please," she said, forcing her voice to stay steady despite the terror clawing at her throat. "Take the cash from my wallet. Just let me keep everything else." The man with the knife laughed, a sound that held no humor. "You think you're negotiating? Lady, you're in the wrong part of town to have opinions." He moved closer, and Thania backed against a concrete pillar, calculating distances and exits. Her self-defense instructor had taught her to scream, to fight, to run if possible. But 3 armed men in an empty parking garage left few options beyond compliance and prayer. The lead man raised his gun, not pointing it directly at her yet, but making the threat unmistakable. "Last chance, everything you've got, or we take it after you're not conscious to complain." Thania's breath came in short gasps. She was about to surrender, about to hand over everything including her dignity, when a voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Step away from her." The command came from the shadows near the stairwell entrance, calm and utterly without fear. All 4 of them turned to see a man walking toward them with the unhurried confidence of someone who'd assessed the situation and found it manageable. He was maybe 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered, wearing work boots, paint-stained jeans, and a canvas jacket that had seen better years. His dark hair was cut short, his face weathered in a way that suggested outdoor work and hard living. He looked like a construction worker or a contractor, someone who'd stayed late on a job site and was just heading home. He looked, in other words, like exactly the wrong person to interfere with an armed robbery. "Walk away, hero," the lead gunman said, turning his weapon toward the newcomer. "This doesn't concern you." "Can't do that," the man replied, still walking forward with that same measured pace. "See, I've got a daughter at home waiting for me to tuck her in, and I can't look her in the eye tomorrow if I walked past someone who needed help tonight." Thania watched in horrified fascination as the stranger closed the distance. He should have been terrified. He should have been running. Instead, he moved like someone approaching a minor inconvenience, rather than 3 armed criminals. "You've got 5 seconds to turn around," the gunman warned, his voice rising with anger and confusion. I will shoot you." "No, you won't," the stranger said with absolute certainty. "You're going to lower that weapon, collect your friends, and leave this garage. Because if you don't, the next 60 seconds are going to be very educational for you." What happened next would later be described by Thania Foster as the most precisely violent thing she'd ever witnessed. The gunman's finger tightened on the trigger. The stranger moved. It wasn't fast in the way movies portrayed speed, all blurred motion and impossible physics. It was fast in the way that mattered, economical and devastating. The stranger closed the final 10 feet in 2 strides, his hand striking the gunman's wrist with surgical precision. The gun clattered to concrete, and before it had even stopped skidding, the stranger had the gunman on the ground, one arm twisted behind his back at an angle that promised agony if he moved. The man with the knife lunged. The stranger didn't even look at him, just shifted his weight and delivered a kick to the attacker's knee that buckled the joint with an audible crack. The knife wielder went down hard, his weapon spinning away into the darkness. The third man, the one with the chain, hesitated. That hesitation cost him everything. The stranger released the gunman long enough to close the distance, deflecting the chain with his forearm and driving his fist into the attacker's solar plexus with controlled force. The man folded like paper, gasping for air that wouldn't come. 8 seconds. That's how long it took for Levi Armstrong to neutralize 3 armed men without breaking a sweat or losing the calm expression he'd worn throughout. The lead gunman tried to scramble for his weapon. Levi's boot came down on his hand, not hard enough to break bones, but firmly enough to make the point. "I told you it would be educational." Thania stood frozen against the pillar, her mind struggling to process what her eyes had just witnessed. This man, who looked like he installed drywall for a living, had just taken down 3 armed criminals with the kind of efficiency that spoke of training most people only saw in movies. Levi pulled out his phone with his free hand, keeping his boot on the gunman's wrist. "Yeah. I need police at Summit Tower parking garage. Level B2. 3 individuals attempted armed robbery. They're going to need medical attention, nothing serious, but they'll probably complain a lot." He listened for a moment, then added, "Tell them to bring 3 sets of restraints, and maybe some ice for the one with the knee. He's having a rough night." After ending the call, Levi finally looked directly at Thania. His eyes were striking, a clear gray that seemed to see more than casual observation would allow. "Are you hurt, ma'am?" Thania found her voice, though it came out shakier than she would have liked. "No, I'm fine. You just saved my life. Just happened to be here," Levi said with a shrug that suggested he'd done nothing more remarkable than help someone change a flat tire. "Wrong place, right time, I suppose." "Wrong place?" Thania repeated, a slightly hysterical laugh escaping. "You just took down 3 armed men in less than 10 seconds. That's not luck or coincidence. That's training." Levi's expression flickered with something that might have been discomfort. "Used to be a Marine. Muscle memory never quite goes away." The distant sound of sirens began to echo through the parking structure. The 3 would-be robbers lay in various states of consciousness and pain, none of them attempting to move or continue the fight. They'd learned their lesson about underestimating men in paint-stained clothes. Thania straightened her suit jacket, trying to regain some composure. "I'm Thania Foster. I owe you more than I can possibly express right now." "Levi Armstrong," he replied. "And you don't owe me anything. Just doing what anyone should do. Anyone." Thania gestured at the 3 incapacitated criminals. "Most people don't have the ability to do what you just did. Most people would have called the police and stayed hidden. Most people don't have a 7-year-old at home who believes her dad is a superhero," Levi said with a slight smile. "Hard to maintain that image if I walk past someone in trouble." Police cars began pulling into the parking structure, their lights painting the concrete in alternating blue and red. Officers emerged with weapons drawn, assessing the scene with professional caution. Levi raised his hands slightly, making himself non-threatening. The three on the ground are your suspects. The lady against the pillar is the victim. I'm the witness who intervened." What followed was 2 hours of statements and questions and the bureaucratic machinery of law enforcement processing an incident. Thania found herself repeating the story multiple times, each telling making it sound more surreal. A construction worker had taken down 3 armed criminals with the casual efficiency of someone who'd done similar things many times before. The lead detective, a woman named Vaughn who'd been working Ashford Heights for 15 years, took particular interest in Levi's involvement. "You said you were a Marine, Mr. Armstrong?" "5 years, 2 deployments," Levi confirmed. "Honorably discharged 4 years ago. Infantry? Force reconnaissance." Detective Vaughn's eyebrows rose slightly. Force recon wasn't standard infantry. It was special operations, the Marines' answer to Navy SEALs. It explained the efficiency, the precision, the complete absence of hesitation in Levi's response to the threat. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Well," Vaughn said finally, "you probably saved Miss Foster's life tonight. These 3 have warrants in 2 states. They weren't planning to leave witnesses." The words hit Thania like a physical blow. She'd been seconds away from becoming a statistic, another name in the city's crime reports, and only this stranger's intervention had prevented it. As the police finished processing the scene and began loading the suspects into patrol cars, Thania approached Levi one final time. He was leaning against his truck, an older Ford, with contractor's equipment visible in the bed, looking tired in a way that suggested his day had been long before this incident. "Mr. Armstrong," she began, then paused, trying to find words adequate to the moment. "Thank you doesn't seem sufficient." "It's sufficient," Levi assured her. "Go home, Miss Foster. Hug your loved ones. Forget this happened." "I can't forget this," Thania said, "and I don't want to. You risked your life for a complete stranger. That deserves more than just thanks." Levi met her eyes, and for a moment, Thania saw something beneath the calm exterior. Weariness, perhaps, or the weight of memories that didn't sleep quietly. "I've got a daughter waiting at home, Miss Foster. She's the only thanks I need, knowing I can still look at her and know I did the right thing. That's enough." He climbed into his truck, started the engine, and drove away into the Ashford Heights night, leaving Thania standing in a parking garage that smelled like oil and violence, wondering about the man who'd saved her life and then disappeared, like he'd done nothing more remarkable than hold open a door. What Thania didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that this wasn't the end of their connection. It was barely the beginning, and in the days to come, she would discover that Levi Armstrong's past held secrets that made tonight's violence look like a gentle introduction to the storm that was coming. The house on Maple Grove Avenue was small but loved. The kind of place that accumulated character through years of careful maintenance and modest improvements. Levi Armstrong pulled his truck into the driveway at 2:15 a.m., exhausted in ways that had nothing to do with the physical confrontation in the parking garage and everything to do with the memories it had awakened. Inside, the babysitter was asleep on the couch. A college student named Kiana who lived 3 houses down and watched Lily whenever Levi's construction jobs ran late. He woke her gently, paid her double the agreed rate because of the hour, and locked the door behind her before climbing the stairs to check on his daughter. Lily Armstrong was 7 years old, all wild curls and endless questions, currently sprawled across her bed in pajamas covered with astronauts and planets. Her room was an explosion of interests that changed weekly. Last month it had been dinosaurs. This month it was space exploration, and Levi had learned to simply support whatever captured her imagination without trying to predict what would come next. He stood in the doorway, watching her sleep, and felt the familiar ache of gratitude mixed with grief. She looked so much like Amanda, his late wife, that sometimes it physically hurt to see certain expressions cross Lily's face. The way she concentrated when drawing. The way she laughed at her own jokes before delivering the punchline. The way she trusted the world to be good because she'd never been given reason to believe otherwise. Amanda had died 3 years ago in a car accident so sudden and senseless that Levi still couldn't fully process it. One moment she'd been driving to pick up groceries, the next she was gone, taken by a drunk driver who'd walked away with minor injuries while Amanda bled out before the ambulance arrived. The Marines had taught Levi how to survive combat, how to accomplish impossible missions, how to lead men through hell and bring them home alive. But nothing in that training had prepared him for single parenthood, for being both mother and father to a little girl who'd lost half her world before she was old enough to understand what death actually meant. He'd left the Corps 6 months after Amanda's funeral, unable to reconcile the demands of military service with being the parent Lily needed. His command had understood, had even offered him desk positions that would keep him stateside, but Levi had known that half measures wouldn't work. Either he was fully present for his daughter, or he wasn't. There was no middle ground. So Levi Armstrong, decorated Force Recon Marine, had become Levi Armstrong, general contractor and single father in Ashford Heights. He'd bought this house with Amanda's life insurance payout, started his own small construction business, and built a life that was ordinary and peaceful, and everything his previous existence hadn't been. Most days, it was enough. Most days, he could convince himself that the trade had been worth it, that Lily's happiness justified leaving behind the brotherhood and purpose the Marines had provided, that building decks and renovating kitchens was just as meaningful as the missions that had once defined his identity. But nights like tonight reminded him of what lived beneath the surface, the training and instincts that never fully went dormant, the ability to assess threats and neutralize them with precision that civilian life didn't require but couldn't completely erase. Levi pulled Lily's blanket up over her shoulders, kissed her forehead gently, and retreated to his own bedroom. Sleep would be difficult, the adrenaline from the parking garage confrontation still humming through his system despite the hours that had passed. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Amanda's picture on the nightstand catching ambient light from the street. In the photo, she was laughing at something he'd said, her joy captured forever in that frozen moment, before cancer or accidents or any of life's cruelties had touched them. "I did the right thing tonight," Levi whispered to the photograph, a ritual he'd developed for moments when doubt crept in. "Someone needed help. I helped them. That's what you would have wanted me to do." The photo offered no response, but Levi took comfort in the imagined approval. Amanda had always believed in helping others, in standing up when action was required. She would have been proud of tonight, even if it had revealed aspects of himself he preferred to keep buried. Morning came too soon, announced by Lily's enthusiastic entrance into his bedroom at 6:30 a.m. She launched herself onto the bed with the energy of someone who'd slept soundly and woke up ready to conquer the world. "Daddy, Daddy. It's Wednesday. We're doing science experiments at school today. Mrs. Chambers said we're going to make volcanoes." Levi groaned and pulled his daughter into a hug, her energy infectious despite his exhaustion. "Volcanoes sound dangerous. Should I be worried about Ashford Elementary exploding?" "It's just baking soda and vinegar," Lily said with the exasperation of someone explaining obvious facts to a slow adult. "It's not real lava, though that would be cooler. Definitely cooler." Levi agreed, forcing himself to sit up. "But probably harder to clean up. Come on, let's get you breakfast, before we start discussing actual geological disasters." The morning routine unfolded with the comfortable predictability that defined their lives. Lily chattered about school while eating cereal that was probably more sugar than grain. Levi packed her lunch, including the apple she would inevitably trade for someone else's cookies, and made sure her backpack contained the homework that had been completed the night before. They drove to Ashford Elementary through morning traffic, Lily providing running commentary on every interesting thing visible from the car window. A dog walking its owner, in her description. A billboard advertising something she couldn't read yet but found visually compelling. The coffee shop where Daddy sometimes stopped for his special adult juice. That made him more awake. "Bye, Daddy," Lily called as she scrambled out of the truck, her backpack nearly as large as she was. "Love you." Love you more than the whole sky. Levi replied. Their ritual phrased that. Amanda had started, and he'd continued. That's impossible to measure, Lily informed him with scientific authority. But I appreciate the sentiment. She disappeared into the school building. Absorbed immediately into the chaos of other 7-year-olds preparing for a day of learning and socialization. Levi watched until she was safely inside, then headed to his current job site across town. The construction project was a kitchen renovation for a family in the suburb. Straightforward work that required more attention to detail than creative problem-solving. Levi spent the morning measuring cabinets and checking electrical layouts, his hands busy while his mind wandered back to the parking garage. He'd tried to be careful, to use only the minimum force necessary to neutralize the threat, but the ease with which his body had responded, the automatic precision of movements he hadn't practiced in years, reminded him that some training never truly faded. The Marine who'd run reconnaissance missions in hostile territory still lived inside the contractor who installed kitchen backsplashes. His phone rang at 11:30, an unknown number he almost didn't answer. Professional habit made him pick up anyway. Contractors needed to be available for potential clients. Is this Levi Armstrong? A woman's voice, professional and cultured, vaguely familiar. Speaking. Who's this? Thania Foster. We met last night. In less than ideal circumstances. I wanted to call and thank you properly. Now that I've had time to process what happened. Levi set down his measuring tape, stepping away from the job site for privacy. Miss Foster, you really didn't need to track down my number. I'm just glad you're okay. The police gave me your contact information when I asked. Thania explained. I hope you don't mind. I wanted to do more than just say thank you in a parking garage at midnight. Would you be willing to meet for coffee? I promise it's not an ambush, just a conversation between two people who experienced something traumatic together. Levi hesitated. His instinct was to decline politely, to maintain the distance between his ordinary life and the incident that had briefly pulled him back toward his old identity. But something in Thania's voice suggested this was important to her, and refusing seemed cruel after what she'd been through. Coffee would be fine, Levi said finally. I've got a job site until 3, but I could meet you after that. They arranged to meet at a cafe called the Roasted Bean, a place Levi knew was safe and public enough that Thania wouldn't feel uncomfortable. After ending the call, he returned to his measurements, trying to ignore the small voice, suggesting that accepting this meeting might be a mistake. The Roasted Bean occupied a corner storefront in downtown Ashford Heights, all exposed brick and reclaimed wood and the kind of carefully curated aesthetic that signaled expensive coffee. Levi arrived at 3:15, wearing clean work clothes, having stopped at his truck to wash his hands and make himself moderately presentable. Thania was already there, seated at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee, and an expression that mixed gratitude with something harder to identify. She'd traded last night's business suit for jeans and a sweater, looking more approachable but no less composed. Mr. Armstrong, thank you for coming, she said as Levi sat down. I wasn't sure you would. You can call me Levi, he said, accepting the coffee she'd apparently ordered for him. And I said I would come, so I came. Right. Marines don't break promises, I suppose. Most people don't break promises, Levi countered gently. It's not a military thing, it's a basic decency thing. Thania smiled at that, some of her corporate polish cracking to reveal genuine warmth underneath. Fair point. I've spent too long in boardrooms where promises are negotiable and contracts are the only things that matter. It colors my perspective. They talked for 20 minutes about surface things, carefully avoiding the incident that had brought them together. Thania explained she was CEO of Foster Technologies, a mid-sized firm specializing in cybersecurity solutions. Levi described his construction business with modest understatement, leaving out the parts where his attention to detail came from training that had nothing to do with building codes. Finally, Thania set down her coffee cup and looked at him directly. Levi, I need to tell you something. Those 3 men last night? They weren't random criminals looking for a quick score. They were sent specifically to target me. Levi felt ice form in his stomach. Explain. My company has been working on exposing a major corporate fraud case. One of our clients hired us to investigate suspicious activities at a pharmaceutical company called Apex Biomed. We discovered they've been falsifying drug trial results, bribing FDA officials, and releasing medications they know are ineffective or dangerous. We're scheduled to present our findings to federal regulators next week. And someone wants to stop you, Levi said, seeing where this was going. Someone wants me dead, intimidated, or discredited. Thania confirmed. Last night wasn't random violence. It was a message. And now that you've interfered, now that you're connected to me in police reports and witness statements, they're going to look at you too. Levi sat back, processing this information and its implications. He'd thought he was intervening in a simple robbery, preventing a tragedy through brief action that would have no lasting consequences. Instead, he'd apparently stepped into the middle of corporate warfare, involving people willing to commit murder to protect their interests. Why are you telling me this? Levi asked quietly. Because you deserve to know what you've gotten involved in, Thania said. And because I need help. Professional help from someone with skills that go beyond what corporate security can provide. Someone who won't be intimidated or bought. Someone like you. Miss Foster. Thania. I'm a contractor. I build things. I left the life where I handled problems like this. Did you? Thania challenged gently, because last night suggested otherwise. You moved like someone who never really left that life, just put it on hold. Levi wanted to argue, but couldn't find words that wouldn't be lies. She was right. Last night had proven that the Marine lived just beneath the surface, ready to emerge when circumstances required. I have a daughter, Levi said finally, the only argument that mattered. I can't put her at risk by getting involved in corporate espionage and pharmaceutical fraud cases. I understand, Thania said. And her tone suggested. She genuinely did. I understand. Can't. N.A. said. And D9. I can't put her at risk by getting involved in corporate espionage. I wouldn't ask if I had other options. But Levi, if Apex Biomed is willing to send armed men after me in a parking garage, they're not going to stop. And the people investigating me now include you, whether you want that or not. At least if you help me, if we work together, we can try to control the situation instead of waiting for it to control us. Levi stood, needing to move, to think. Through the cafe window, Ashford Heights went about its afternoon business, people walking dogs and pushing strollers and living ordinary lives that didn't include assassination attempts and corporate corruption. He'd built this life specifically to escape from missions and complications. He'd promised Amanda's memory that Lily would grow up safe and normal. Getting involved with Thania Foster and her pharmaceutical fraud case would violate every principle he'd established for his post-Marine existence. But walking away would mean leaving someone vulnerable, and the men who'd sent those criminals would eventually succeed through attrition, if not opposed. And more fundamentally, leaving Thania unprotected felt like a betrayal of everything the Marines had taught him about honor and duty, and standing between the innocent and those who'd harm them. I need to think about this, Levi said finally. That's not a no, but it's not a yes either. Give me 24 hours. Thania nodded, understanding in her eyes. 24 hours. But Levi, while you're thinking, consider this. Sometimes the best way to protect the people we love is to stop threats before they reach them. If Apex Biomed is willing to kill to protect their fraud, they won't stop with me. Eventually, they'll eliminate anyone connected to the investigation. That could include witnesses like you, or even leverage like your daughter. The words hung in the air between them. A threat not from Thania, but from the reality of the communist situation. Levi had already painted a target on his back the moment he'd intervened last night. The only question was whether he'd address that threat proactively, or wait for it to find him at a time and place of the enemy's choosing. He left the cafe without another word, his mind already running through tactical assessments and risk calculations that had no place in a contractor's ordinary life. The decision should have been simple: walk away, protect Lily through distance and anonymity, let others handle corporate fraud. But Levi had been a Marine long enough to know that simple answers rarely addressed complex problems, and this problem, he was beginning to suspect, was far more complex than a CEO being targeted by pharmaceutical criminals. The nightmares came that night with a clarity Levi hadn't experienced in months. He was back in Kandahar province, the Afghan mountains looming like silent witnesses to violence that officially never happened. His recon team was pinned down in a compound, surrounded by hostile forces that had somehow known their exact insertion point, their planned route, their entire operational timeline. Someone had betrayed them. Someone with access to classified mission parameters had sold them out to the enemy. And now 8 Marines were fighting for their lives against odds that made survival increasingly unlikely with each passing minute. In the dream, as in reality, Levi made the decision that would define the rest of his life. He took 3 men and created a diversion, drawing enemy fire, while the rest of his team extracted with the intelligence they'd been sent to gather. The diversion worked. 5 Marines made it out alive, carrying evidence that would later expose a massive corruption network within Afghan provincial government. 3 didn't make it. 3 men under Levi's command died, buying time for a mission that ultimately mattered less than their lives had. Corporal Hayes, who'd planned to propose to his girlfriend when he got home. Sergeant Kimura, who'd been 2 weeks from rotating back to his newborn son. Lance Corporal Washington, who'd been in country for only 3 months and had trusted Levi's leadership completely. They'd received posthumous medals that their families kept in shadow boxes, official recognition of sacrifice that did nothing to fill the empty chairs at holiday dinners or answer questions from young people who'd never know their fathers. Levi woke at 4 a.m., sweat-soaked and gasping. These nightmares had been frequent in the first year after leaving the Marines, then gradually faded as civilian life imposed its routines and distractions. But Thania Foster's revelation yesterday had torn open old wounds, reminded him that the world he'd left behind still existed, and still demanded prices from those who operated in its shadows. He lay in darkness, listening to his house settle around him. Down the hall, Lily slept peacefully, unaware that her father spent some nights reliving deaths he couldn't prevent and tactical decisions he'd replay forever, searching for the choice that might have saved everyone. The mission in Kandahar had been his last. After that operation, after attending 3 military funerals and watching mothers receive folded flags, Levi had requested transfer to administrative duties. He'd completed his service obligation behind a desk, processing paperwork and training new recruits, and trying to convince himself that he could still serve effectively without leading men into situations where some wouldn't return. Then Amanda had been diagnosed with ovarian cancer, and his priorities had shifted completely. The Corps had been understanding, processing his early separation with efficiency and respect. They'd offered veteran support services, counseling, and career placement assistance. Levi had accepted it all with gratitude while knowing that no amount of support could address the fundamental question that haunted him. Was he a good man who'd done terrible things? Or a terrible man who'd occasionally done good things? The distinction mattered because it determined whether he deserved the peaceful life he'd built, whether Lily deserved a father whose hands carried so much blood, even if that blood had been spilled in service of causes deemed just by people in positions to make such judgments. At 6 a.m., Levi gave up on sleep and went downstairs to make coffee. The kitchen window looked out on a backyard that needed mowing, a fence that required painting, the ordinary maintenance tasks that filled his weekends. It was aggressively normal, determinedly mundane, everything he'd wanted after years of extraordinary violence. But Thania Foster's words echoed in his mind. Sometimes, the best way to protect the people we love is to stop threats before they reach them. If Apex Biomed was truly willing to kill witnesses and whistleblowers, then staying uninvolved wouldn't protect Lily. It would just delay the inevitable moment when corporate assassins decided that loose ends needed elimination. Levi's phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number. But the content made his blood run cold. We know about your daughter. Ashford Elementary, Mrs. Chambers' second grade class. She's very pretty, lots of curly hair like her mother had. Would be a shame if something happened to her, because her father didn't mind his own business. The phone nearly shattered in Levi's grip. Rage flooded through him, the kind of cold fury that had made him effective in combat and dangerous afterward. They'd threatened Lily. They'd crossed the one line that transformed this from a situation he could walk away from into a war he would fight with every skill and resource he possessed. He called Thania immediately, not caring about the early hour. She answered on the second ring, her voice alert despite the time. Levi, they threatened my daughter, sent me a text with details about her school and her teacher. That changes things. I'm so sorry, Thania said, genuine distress in her voice. I never wanted to bring danger to your family. If I had known they'd escalate this fast, I wouldn't have contacted you. Too late for regrets, Levi said, his voice hard with decision. You said you needed help, professional help from someone with particular skills. Consider me hired, but we do this my way, with my rules, and your complete honesty about everything you know regarding Apex Biomed and whoever's targeting you. Understood. Understood completely. When can we meet? I need to secure my daughter first. Give me 3 hours. Levi ended the call and immediately began making arrangements that would have seemed paranoid to anyone who hadn't spent years operating in environments where paranoia meant survival. He called his sister Elise in Portland, someone he hadn't spoken to in 6 months but who would understand the urgency in his voice. Levi, it's 6 in the morning. This better be important. I need you to take Lily for a while. A week. Maybe 2. I can't explain everything, but she's not safe here right now. Elise's voice sharpened instantly, the protective aunt overriding the annoyed sister. What's going on? Are you in trouble? I'm helping someone who's in trouble, and it's created complications. Lily doesn't know anything, doesn't need to know anything. As far as she's concerned, this is just a surprise visit to Aunt Elise in Portland to see the city, and go to the zoo and eat too much ice cream. Can you do that for me? There was a long pause. Elise knew about his Marine service, knew there were parts of his past he didn't discuss at family gatherings. She was smart enough to read between the lines. We'll pick her up this afternoon. I'll tell work I have a family emergency. Marcus can work from home with the kids. Levi, be careful with whatever you're involved in. Lily needs her father. That's exactly why I'm doing this, Levi said quietly. To make sure she still has one when this is over. The next 3 hours were a blur of activity. Levi woke Lily gently, spinning a story about a surprise vacation to Portland that had her excited despite the short notice. He packed her bags, called the school to report she'd be absent for family reasons, and tried to act normal while his mind cataloged weapons and tactical resources he'd need for what was coming. Elise and her husband arrived at noon. Their minivan already loaded with their own 2 offspring, who were thrilled to have their cousin joining them. Lily was absorbed into the chaos of family travel with barely a backward glance, her trust in her father absolute enough that she never questioned the sudden change in plans. Be good for Aunt Elise, Levi said, hugging his daughter tightly enough that she squirmed. I'm always good, Lily informed him with 7-year-old certainty. When will you come visit? Soon as I can, sweetheart. I love you more than the whole sky. Impossible to measure, Lily replied with their ritual response. Then she was climbing into the minivan, and Elise was pulling away from the curb, and Levi's daughter was safe even if that safety came at the cost of her presence. Alone in his house for the first time in years, Levi descended to the basement where he kept the things Amanda had never asked about and Lily had never discovered. Behind false panels in the storage area were cases containing equipment from his Force Recon days, body armor that was technically government property he'd neglected to return. Weapons that were legally registered but served no purpose in a contractor's peaceful life. Communication gear that could tap into encrypted frequencies. Night vision equipment. Combat knives. Everything a Marine might need if called back to action. Levi pulled it all out, checking each piece with practiced efficiency. The muscle memory was still there, the automatic assessment of gear and readiness. He'd been a contractor for 4 years, but he'd been a Marine for 5. Some training ran too deep to forget. His phone rang. "Thania, is your daughter safe?" "On her way to Portland with my sister. They threatened her, so she's out of play. Now we can focus on stopping whoever thinks killing witnesses is an acceptable business strategy. Where do you want to meet?" "My office at Foster Technologies. It's secure. And I have all the documentation about the Apex Biomed investigation. We need to go through everything, so you understand what we're up against. I'll be there in 30 minutes. And Thania, from this point forward, you don't go anywhere without me. You don't take meetings I haven't vetted. You don't trust anyone I haven't cleared. This is a war now, and wars have rules that keep people alive. Following them is non-negotiable." "I understand. I'll see you soon." Levi loaded his gear into his truck, covering it with tarps and construction equipment to maintain the cover of normalcy. To anyone watching, he was just a contractor heading to a job site. No, one would guess that beneath the paint cans and power tools was enough tactical equipment to outfit a small military operation. As he drove toward downtown Ashford Heights, Levi allowed himself one moment of honest reflection. He'd spent 4 years trying to leave the warrior behind, trying to be just a father, and a contractor, and an ordinary citizen. But the warrior had never left. He'd just been sleeping, waiting for the moment when duty called him back to action. That moment had arrived, and Levi Armstrong, former Force Recon Marine, was going to remind Apex Biomed and whoever they'd hired that some men never truly leave the battlefield. They just choose when to fight, and this fight had become unavoidable the moment they'd threatened his daughter. The war had begun, and this time, Levi wasn't constrained by rules of engagement or command structure or political considerations. This time, he was fighting to protect his family, and that made him more dangerous than any mission the Marines had ever assigned. Apex Biomed had made a critical mistake. They'd awakened something they couldn't control and couldn't defeat. And in the days to come, they would learn what happened when corporate criminals crossed a man who'd been trained by the best military in the world to accomplish impossible missions through any means necessary. The quiet contractor was done being quiet. The father was done pretending the warrior didn't exist. And the people who'd threatened Lily Armstrong were about to discover that some debts get paid in blood, and some fathers will burn the world to ashes before they let harm reach their daughters. Foster Technologies occupied the 20th floor of the Meridian building, all glass walls and modern efficiency. Levi arrived carrying a contractor's toolbox that concealed surveillance detection equipment, his eyes automatically cataloging security cameras and exit routes as he moved through the lobby. Thania met him at the elevator, her professional composure firmly in place despite the circumstances. "Thank you for coming. I know this isn't what you wanted." "What I wanted stopped mattering when they threatened Lily," Levi replied as the elevator climbed. "Now it's about making sure they can't threaten anyone ever again." Her office was corner suite luxury, but Thania bypassed the expensive furniture and led him to a conference room where files covered every available surface. "This is everything we've compiled on Apex Biomed over the past 6 months. Clinical trial data, financial records, witness statements from former employees. It's enough to destroy them if it reaches federal regulators." Levi spent 2 hours reviewing the documentation, his mind processing information with the analytical precision Force Recon had trained into him. Apex Biomed wasn't just cutting corners. They were systematically falsifying drug trials for medications treating heart conditions and diabetes. People had died taking drugs that didn't work. More would die if this continued. "Who knows about this investigation?" Levi asked finally. "My core team. 4 people. The federal regulators. We're scheduled to brief next week, and apparently, Someone inside Apex who leaked our investigation to their security apparatus. You have a mole. Had a mole. Thania corrected grimly. One of my analysts, Hudson Vaughn, disappeared 3 days ago. His apartment was cleaned out professionally. Either he was the leak and ran, or he was discovered and eliminated. Levi's tactical mind assembled the puzzle pieces. They know your timeline. They know who's involved. The parking garage attack was their first move, crude intimidation to make you back down. When that failed, they'll escalate to more sophisticated approaches. What do you suggest? We accelerate. If they expect you to present findings next week, we move the meeting to tomorrow. Surprise is our only advantage against an enemy with superior resources and inside information. Thania reached for her phone. I'll contact the FDA liaison, see if we can expedite the briefing. While she made calls, Levi swept her office for surveillance devices using equipment from his toolbox. He found 2 listening devices, professionally installed and connected to cellular transmitters. Someone had been monitoring Thania's conversations in real time, which explained how Apex had stayed ahead of her investigation. He disabled both devices carefully, preserving them as evidence while cutting off the enemy's intelligence feed. It was a small victory, but small victories accumulated into operational advantage. Thania finished her call with a mixture of triumph and concern. They can see us tomorrow at 2 p.m. But Levi, moving this fast, means we have less than 24 hours to prepare, and Apex will probably realize something's changed when their surveillance goes dark. Good, Levi said simply. Let them realize it. Let them scramble and make mistakes. Panicked enemies are predictable enemies. What he didn't say was that panicked enemies were also desperate ones. And desperation made people dangerous in ways calculation couldn't. The next 24 hours would determine whether they could expose Apex Biomed's fraud before the pharmaceutical company eliminated everyone who knew about it. Levi's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. He opened it to find a photograph that made his blood run cold despite knowing Lily was safe. It was his house on Maple Grove Avenue, taken from across the street within the last hour based on the lighting. The message below read simply, "Still time to reconsider. They're watching my house," Levi said, showing Thania the image. "They know Lily's gone, but want me to know they could have reached her if I hadn't moved first." "I'm so sorry," Thania whispered. "This is my fault." "No," Levi corrected firmly. "This is Apex Biomed's fault for thinking they could murder their way out of accountability. You're just the person brave enough to stand up to them. That makes you a hero, not a villain." He forwarded the threatening photo to Detective Vaughn at Ashford Heights PD with a brief explanation. It wouldn't stop Apex's surveillance, but it created an official record that might prove useful later. As afternoon faded into evening, they worked through strategy and contingencies. Thania would present the evidence tomorrow, while Levi provided security and tactical oversight. If Apex tried to interfere, if they sent more than parking garage thugs, they'd discover that threatening a Force Recon Marines family was a mistake that came with permanent consequences. The breaking point had arrived. Levi Armstrong's cover as a simple contractor was thoroughly blown, and the warrior beneath had emerged fully. There was no going back to the quiet life now, only forward, through whatever violence and danger waited, until the threat to his daughter and Thania Foster was eliminated completely. The attack came at midnight. Levi had insisted on staying at Foster Technologies overnight, his instincts warning that Apex would make a move before tomorrow's federal briefing. Thania had argued briefly before recognizing the wisdom in his caution. They were reviewing witness statements when the building's fire alarm erupted in piercing chaos. Levi was moving before conscious thought engaged, his hand going to the concealed firearm he'd started carrying after the threats began. "That's not a real alarm," he said, pulling Thania away from the windows. "It's a clearing tactic. They're evacuating the building to isolate us." "How do you know?" "Because it's what I do." Through the glass walls, Levi saw other offices emptying as people responded to the alarm, but the 20th floor remained eerily still except for them And that wrongness confirmed his assessment. This was a targeted operation disguised as building emergency. The conference room door burst open. 3 men entered with military precision, wearing maintenance uniforms that didn't match their tactical movement. They weren't carrying visible weapons, but their body language screamed professional operators. The lead man smiled without warmth. "Miss Foster, Mr. Armstrong, our employer would like a word before tomorrow's unfortunate meeting gets cancelled." "Not interested," Levi replied, positioning himself between Thania and the intruders. His mind was already calculating angles and responses, the familiar combat assessment running automatically. "That wasn't a request," the man said, reaching inside his jacket. What happened next took 6 seconds. Levi moved like water, closing the distance before the operative could draw his weapon. A precise strike to the man's wrist numbed his hand, and Levi controlled the emerging gun with practiced efficiency. The second operative lunged, and Levi redirected his momentum into the conference table with force calculated to stun but not kill. The third man was smarter, backing toward the door, while speaking urgently into a radio. "Target is military trained. Need backup on 20. Levi released the first operative and turned his attention to the communicator. "Tell your employer that former Force Recon Marines don't respond well to kidnapping attempts. And tell them that every escalation from this point forward will be met with overwhelming response." The operative's eyes widened slightly at Force Recon, professional recognition of what that designation meant. "You're making a mistake. Apex Biomed has resources you can't imagine." "Apex Biomed has money," Levi corrected. "I have skills that money can't buy and motivation that money can't overcome. Now leave, before I stop being polite." The 3 operatives retreated, dragging their stunned companion, and leaving behind dropped equipment that Levi quickly collected. Professional surveillance gear, encrypted radios, and most tellingly, a syringe containing something that probably wasn't vitamins. Thania was pale, but composed. "They were going to drug us. Make it look like we never made it out of the building during the fire alarm." "Probably," Levi agreed, examining the syringe. "This needs to go to federal investigators as evidence of witness tampering, along with everything else we're documenting." She sat down heavily, the adrenaline crash hitting. "Levi, why are you so good at this? Force Recon explains the combat skills, but the tactical thinking, the way you anticipated their plan, that's something more." Levi was quiet for a long moment, debating how much to reveal. Finally, he said, "There was a mission in Afghanistan. My team was sent to investigate corruption in provincial government, specifically regarding medical supply contracts. We discovered that a pharmaceutical company was bribing officials to approve substandard medications for military and civilian use." "Apex Biomed?" Thania asked quietly. "A subsidiary they've since dissolved and distanced themselves from." "But yes, the same corporate structure. The same executives making decisions. That mission went bad. We were betrayed by someone who knew our operational details. 3 of my men died extracting intelligence that ultimately exposed the corruption. But by the time it reached people who could act, the evidence had been classified for national security reasons." "So you've fought Apex before?" Thania said, understanding dawning. "This isn't just about protecting me. This is personal. It became personal when they threatened my daughter," Levi corrected. "But yes, knowing that the company responsible for killing my Marines is still operating, still killing people through fraudulent drugs, that adds weight to this fight." Thania stood and crossed to where Levi was securing the collected evidence. "The 3 men who died on that mission, did you know them well?" "Hayes was my best friend. Kimura had a son he never met. Washington trusted me completely." Levi's voice was flat, the emotion locked away behind tactical necessity. "I've spent 4 years trying to honor their sacrifice by being a good father and living a quiet life. But maybe honor requires more than just survival. Maybe it requires finishing what they started. Then we finish it, Thania said with quiet determination. Tomorrow, we expose everything. For your Marines, for the people Apex has killed with fraudulent drugs, for everyone they've threatened and intimidated into silence. Levi met her eyes and saw the same steel that had made her refuse to back down despite death threats. Tomorrow we finish it, but tonight, we need to move you somewhere Apex can't reach. My house is compromised. Your apartment is certainly monitored. We need a safe location. I know a place, Thania said. My late husband's hunting cabin, about 2 hours north. It's in my maiden name on old property records. Apex wouldn't know to look there. They gathered the evidence and left Foster Technologies through a service entrance Levi had scouted earlier. The city was dark and quiet as they drove north, leaving behind the corporate towers and entering hill country, where surveillance became exponentially more difficult. The cabin appeared in their headlights like a refuge from another time, rustic and isolated and exactly what they needed. Inside, while Thania made coffee, Levi conducted a security sweep and established a perimeter alert system using motion sensors from his tactical kit. Tell me about your husband, Levi said as they sat in the cabin's small kitchen, exhaustion finally catching up with them. Nathan was an investigative journalist, Thania replied, her voice soft with memory. He was killed 5 years ago in a car accident while investigating pharmaceutical fraud. At the time, I thought it was just tragedy, terrible timing. But now, knowing what Apex is capable of, I wonder if it was really an accident or if he got too close to truths they couldn't allow to surface. The parallel to Amanda's death wasn't lost on Levi. Both of them had lost spouses to accidents that might have been murder disguised as misfortune. Both carried grief that fueled their determination to see justice delivered. If Apex killed Nathan, Levi said carefully, then tomorrow isn't just about exposing fraud. It's about holding them accountable for murder. For your husband, for my Marines, for everyone they've destroyed in pursuit of profit. Thania nodded, tears she'd been holding back, finally falling. I need this to matter, Levi. I need his death to have meant something beyond personal tragedy. It will, Levi promised. We'll make sure of it. They spent the rest of the night preparing for tomorrow's briefing, organizing evidence, and anticipating Apex's countermoves. As dawn approached, Levi felt the familiar calm that preceded major operations, the acceptance that survival wasn't guaranteed but the mission was worth the risk. The debt to his fallen Marines was about to be paid, the threat to his daughter was about to be eliminated, and Apex Biomed was about to learn that some enemies couldn't be bought, intimidated, or killed. Some enemies just kept coming until justice was delivered, whatever the cost. The call came at 6 a.m., shattering what little rest they'd managed. Levi answered his phone to find Detective Vaughn's voice tight with urgency. Armstrong, we need to talk. Someone torched your house last night. Complete loss. Arson investigators found accelerant traces and timing devices. This was professional. Levi felt cold fury settle over him. His home, the place where he'd built memories with Amanda and raised Lily, had been destroyed as a message. Anyone hurt? No casualties. Neighbors called it in fast, and fire department responded quickly enough to save adjacent properties. But yours is gone. I'm sorry. Don't be, Levi said, his voice hard. They just eliminated any hesitation I had about how far to take this fight. Is the scene secure? For now. Why? Because they'll try to access it, plant evidence, or remove anything that might be useful to us. Post a patrol car there. I'll be back in Ashford Heights this afternoon. After ending the call, Levi turned to find Thania, awake and watching him with concern. What happened? They burned my house down. Everything Amanda and I built, every memory of Lily's early years, gone. Apex is escalating from intimidation to elimination of assets. I'm so sorry, Thania said, genuine anguish in her voice. This is my fault. If I hadn't involved you, if you hadn't involved me, they'd have killed you in that parking garage. And continued killing with impunity. Levi interrupted firmly. This isn't your fault. This is Apex showing their desperation. They know we're close to exposing them, and desperate enemies make mistakes. His phone rang again. Unknown number, but Levi answered anyway. Mr. Armstrong. A cultured voice said. Male and confident. In a way that suggested power and resources. My name is Preston Ford. I'm Chief Legal Counsel for Apex Biomed. I'm calling to offer you an opportunity to walk away from this unfortunate situation with appropriate compensation. Not interested, Levi said flatly. You haven't heard the offer. $1 million transferred to any account you specify in exchange for convincing Miss Foster to withdraw her accusations and discontinue her investigation. Additionally, we'll provide housing to replace what was unfortunately lost in last night's fire. You admit to arson? Levi asked, putting the phone on speaker so Thania could hear. Ford laughed smoothly. I admit to nothing. I'm merely offering compensation for losses incurred while you've been associated with Miss Foster's misguided crusade. The offer expires in 1 hour. After that, our approach becomes less diplomatic. Here's my counteroffer, Levi said, his voice dropping to the register that had made enemy combatants reconsider their life choices. Apex Biomed surrenders all fraudulent trial data to federal regulators. Compensates families of everyone killed by their defective medications, and every executive involved in the fraud turns themselves in for prosecution. You have until our federal briefing this afternoon. After that, I stop being diplomatic. There was a pause, then Ford's voice returned, colder now. You're making a terrible mistake, Mr. Armstrong. We know about your daughter in Portland. We know about Miss Foster's elderly mother in Pine Haven Assisted Living. We know every pressure point, every person you care about. Walk away, or watch them suffer consequences. The line went dead. Levi's hand tightened on the phone until the case creaked. They'd threatened Lily again, and now Thania's mother. The gloves were completely off. We need to secure your mother immediately, Levi said. Where's Pine Haven? 20 minutes from here. But Levi, my mother has early-stage dementia. Moving her could be traumatic, confusing. More traumatic than Apex's operatives reaching her. Call the facility. Tell them your mother is being temporarily relocated for family reasons. I'll arrange secure transport. While Thania made arrangements, Levi called in a favor from his force. Recon days. Sergeant Alec Jennings had retired to private security work and owed Levi his life from a mission outside Fallujah. The debt was about to be called in. Jennings, I need protective transport and secure housing for an elderly woman with dementia. 2-week assignment, maybe longer. Full compensation and hazard pay. Where and when? Alec asked without hesitation, understanding that Levi wouldn't ask unless it was critical. I'll send coordinates. This is corporate warfare, not military. But the opposition has resources and no moral boundaries. Treat it as a combat protection detail. On it. Transport will be there in 90 minutes. Levi ended the call and turned to Thania, who was crying silently while finishing her own phone conversation. Mom's confused about why she's leaving, but the staff is helping her pack. Levi, I can't ask you to spend your resources protecting my family. You're not asking. I'm deciding. And those resources exist specifically for situations like this, where good people face evil opposition and need someone willing to stand between them. They drove to Pine Haven, assisted living in silence, both processing the escalation and its implications. Apex wasn't just threatening anymore. They were actively moving to eliminate anyone connected to the investigation. The federal briefing couldn't come fast enough. Thania's mother, Eleanor, was a small woman with kind eyes and confused questions about why her daughter was visiting so early. Levi watched as Thania explained the surprise vacation with patience and love, managing her mother's dementia with practiced gentleness. When Alec arrived with 2 additional operators, Levi briefed them quickly on the threat profile and security requirements. They were professionals who understood immediately that this was about protecting innocents from corporate violence. "She'll be safe," Alec promised as they loaded Eleanor into an unmarked vehicle. "Nobody reaches her without going through us first, and we're very good at our jobs." After they departed, Thania collapsed against Levi, the weight of everything finally overwhelming her composure. "I'm supposed to be strong. I'm supposed to be the CEO who handles pressure without breaking." "Being strong doesn't mean not breaking," Levi said gently. "It means breaking, and then putting yourself back together to keep fighting. You've done that. You're still doing it. That's strength." They returned to the cabin to prepare for the afternoon briefing. But Levi's tactical mind was already working through contingencies. Apex had escalated to arson and direct threats against family members. The federal briefing would either end this by exposing the fraud or trigger a final desperate move from an enemy with nothing left to lose. Either way, the next 12 hours would determine whether justice prevailed or whether corporate power could murder its way out of accountability. Levi had fought impossible battles before, had led men against superior forces, and won through superior tactics and unwavering commitment. This battle was no different. The enemy had money and lawyers and political connections, but Levi had skills that money couldn't buy, allies who valued honor over profit, and the absolute conviction that came from protecting the people he loved. Apex Biomed had made their final mistake when they'd threatened Lily and Eleanor. Now they would discover what happened when you cornered a warrior who had nothing left to lose except his principles and everything to fight for and the innocents who depended on his protection. The stakes had escalated to their maximum level, and Levi Armstrong, former Force Recon Marine, was about to teach a pharmaceutical company that some lines should never be crossed, and some men never stopped being warriors, no matter how many years they spent pretending otherwise. The federal building in downtown Ashford Heights was fortress architecture, all concrete and security checkpoints designed to withstand everything from protests to attacks. Levi and Thania arrived 90 minutes early, time he used to scout exits and identify potential threat vectors. "You're expecting them to try something here?" Thania asked as Levi cataloged security camera positions. "I'm expecting them to try something everywhere, until we've delivered testimony that can't be silenced." Federal buildings are harder targets, but not impossible ones. Inside, they were met by Agent Clara Jennings from the FDA's Office of Criminal Investigations, a sharp woman in her 40s who'd built her career prosecuting pharmaceutical fraud. She reviewed their evidence with the focused intensity of someone who understood its implications. "This is comprehensive," Clara said after an hour of review. "If even half of this holds up under scrutiny, Apex Biomed is facing criminal charges that will destroy the company. Are you both prepared for the retaliation that's coming?" "Already experiencing it," Levi replied, showing her photographs of his burned house and the threatening messages. "They've escalated to arson and direct threats against family members. That's why we moved the briefing up, before they can eliminate witnesses." Clara's expression hardened. "I'm recommending immediate protective custody for both of you and any family members they've identified. This level of corporate violence requires federal response. Protective custody means surrendering control," Levi said carefully. "And control is what's keeping us alive right now. What we need is for this evidence to be entered into official records so thoroughly that eliminating witnesses becomes pointless." "I can expedite that," Clara agreed. "But understand, once this goes official, Apex will deploy every legal resource they have to discredit the evidence and everyone associated with it. Your lives are going to be examined under microscopes. Every mistake, every questionable decision, everything will be used against you." Thania straightened in her chair. "My reputation can withstand scrutiny. I've built my career on integrity and thorough documentation. Let them examine everything. They'll find someone who's telling the truth." "What about you, Mr. Armstrong?" Clara asked, turning her attention to Levi. "You're not the primary witness, but you're connected to this case now. Anything in your background that Apex might exploit? Levi considered lying, then decided honesty served better. I'm former Force Recon Marine, honorably discharged 4 years ago. Some of my service is classified, which Apex will use to suggest I'm hiding something. My wife died 3 years ago in what was ruled an accident, but might have been murder given what we now know about Apex's methods. And I've used force to protect Miss Foster from attempted kidnapping, which they'll try to spin as excessive violence. None of that disqualifies you as a witness, Clara said. In fact, the military background adds credibility. You're trained to observe and report accurately, and you've responded proportionally to legitimate threats. I don't see vulnerability there. The briefing lasted 3 hours, Thania presenting evidence while Clara's team documented everything with meticulous precision. By the end, multiple federal agencies were being looped in, and the machinery of government prosecution was grinding into motion. As they left the federal building, Levi's phone rang. Alec's number. Eleanor is secure at our facility in the mountains. No one followed us. And we've established a perimeter that would require military force to breach. She's comfortable and thinks she's on vacation at a nice resort. Thank you, Alec. Keep her there until I give the all clear. How long are we talking? Days if we're lucky. Weeks if Apex fights this through legal channels. Months if it goes to trial. Alec was quiet for a moment. Brother, you know I'll hold this position as long as necessary. Eleanor reminds me of my grandmother. Nobody touches her while my team breathes. After ending the call, Levi turned to Thania. Your mother is secure. My daughter is secure. We've delivered evidence to federal investigators who can act on it. The mission is essentially complete. So why don't I feel relieved? Thania asked. Because the mission being complete doesn't mean the danger is over, Levi replied. Apex knows they're cornered now. Cornered animals are most dangerous in the final moments before capture. We need to stay alert until federal marshals have their executives in custody. They drove to a hotel Levi had selected specifically for its security features and limited access points. He registered under a false name, paid cash, and swept the room for surveillance before allowing Thania to enter. Is this how you lived in the Marines? Thania asked, watching him establish their defensive position with practiced efficiency. Constant vigilance. Always preparing for attacks. This is how I lived on deployment, Levi corrected. Between deployments, we trained and maintained equipment and pretended we were normal people with normal lives. But the vigilance never completely turned off. You learn to assess every environment automatically, catalog threats without conscious thought. It becomes exhausting eventually, which is part of why I left. Do you regret leaving? Levi sat on the bed, exhaustion finally catching up with him. I regret that my leaving meant others had to take missions I might have handled better. I regret that Hayes and Kimura and Washington died on an operation I survived. But I don't regret being here for Lily's childhood, being present for the years Amanda had left, building a life that had meaning beyond combat. Even though that life just got destroyed, the house burned, Levi said quietly. The life continues. Lily is safe and loved. The memories of Amanda exist in my heart, not in walls and furniture. Material things can be replaced. People can't. That's why we're doing this. Why we're risking everything to stop Apex. Because the people they've killed with fraudulent medications can't be replaced. And preventing future deaths matters more than our comfort or safety. Thania sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. When this Baidu is over, when Apex executives are in custody, and the threat is neutralized, what will you do? Rebuild. Levi said simply. Get Lily home from Portland, find us a new house, go back to construction work, resume the ordinary life. Can you really do that? After everything that's happened, after remembering what you're capable of, can you really go back to installing cabinets and pretending you're just a contractor? The question cut deeper than Thania probably intended. Could he return to the quiet life after this? Could he forget again that he was a weapon? that he possessed skills most people only encountered in movies. Could he be just Lily's father and nothing more? I don't know, Levi admitted. But I have to try. For her sake, I have to try. They sat in silence as afternoon faded into evening, two people who'd been thrown together by violence and united by determination to see justice delivered. Outside their hotel room, Ashford Heights continued its ordinary existence, unaware that federal investigations were beginning that would shake the pharmaceutical industry and expose corruption that had killed countless innocents. The point of no return had been crossed. Levi Armstrong was no longer the contractor pretending his past didn't exist. He was the warrior protecting the innocent, the Marine honoring his fallen brothers, the father ensuring his daughter inherited a world where corporate murderers faced consequences. There was no going back to who he'd been a week ago, only forward, through whatever trials remained, until the mission was truly complete and the people he loved could finally be safe. The arrest warrants came through at 3 a.m., waking Levi from restless sleep filled with memories of Afghanistan and burning houses. Agent Clara Jennings called personally to deliver the news. Federal marshals are executing warrants now for 12 Apex Biomed executives, including CEO Preston Ford. We've also seized company servers and are shutting down their operations pending investigation. This is happening fast, Armstrong. Your evidence made it airtight. Levi felt satisfaction settle in his chest, but it was tempered by tactical awareness that celebrations came after victory was secured, not during the battle. What about their security apparatus? The people who've been threatening us. That's trickier, Clara admitted. The operatives who attacked you at Foster Technologies are private contractors with plausible deniability. We're pursuing conspiracy charges, but it'll take time to connect them officially to Apex executives, meaning they're still operational and potentially looking for revenge. Potentially, yes. Which is why I'm recommending you both remain in protective custody until we've rolled up the entire network. After ending the call, Levi woke Thania with the news. Her relief was visible, but cautious. Understanding, like he did, that arrests didn't equal safety until convictions were secured and threat neutralized. We should contact the families, Thania said, the people who lost loved ones to Apex's fraudulent medications. They deserve to know justice is coming. Over the next 6 hours, they made calls to 19 families across 7 states. People who'd lost parents and spouses and siblings to medications that hadn't worked because Apex had falsified efficacy trials. Each conversation was emotionally draining, but necessary. These were the people whose suffering had driven Thania's investigation, and they deserved to know their losses hadn't been in vain. By noon, news of the arrests was breaking across media outlets. Apex Biomed's stock price collapsed as investors fled. Competitors issued carefully worded statements about maintaining integrity. Politicians who'd received campaign contributions suddenly discovered urgent reasons to return the money. Levi's phone rang with a number he recognized. Detective Vaughn. Armstrong, I'm watching the news about Apex Biomed. That CEO you saved from the parking garage, she was investigating them all along? She was. And the men who attacked her that night were sent by Apex to intimidate her into dropping the investigation. Well, those 3 are facing additional federal charges now. They're cooperating, giving up information about who hired them and how the operation was structured. You might have accidentally broken open a conspiracy that reaches beyond just pharmaceutical fraud. How far beyond? Still developing, but initial interviews suggest Apex was paying politicians, bribing FDA officials, and using corporate security as a private army to eliminate threats. This is going to be the biggest corporate scandal in a decade. After ending the call, Levi allowed himself a moment of genuine relief. The mission was succeeding. Evidence was becoming prosecutions, and prosecutions would become convictions. The people responsible for killing his Marines and threatening his daughter would face justice. But the celebration was interrupted by his phone ringing again. Unknown number, which he answered cautiously. Mr. Armstrong, this is Ryder Maxwell. I was VP of Research at Apex Biomed until this morning. I'm calling because I have information that might save lives, but I need protection before I can deliver it. Levi's tactical instincts immediately flagged this as either genuine defection or sophisticated trap. Why call me instead of federal investigators? Because I know what Apex is capable of, and I don't trust that federal protection can stop them. But you, your former Force Recon, you've already proven you can handle their security teams. If you guarantee my safety, I'll testify about everything. The falsified trials, the bribery, the executives who ordered witness elimination, all of it. Where are you now? Hiding. I saw the arrest warrants coming and disappeared before marshals reached my house. I have documents they don't know exist, proof of crimes even worse than what your CEO friend documented. But I need safe passage and protection before I surface. Levi made a decision based on instinct and experience. I'll call you back in 30 minutes with a location. Come alone, unarmed, and prepared to surrender any electronic devices. If this is a trap, you won't enjoy the consequences. Understood. Thank you, Mr. Armstrong. After ending the call, Levi immediately contacted Agent Jennings to verify Maxwell's identity and status. She confirmed he was indeed a VP at Apex and that marshals had found his house empty when they'd attempted to serve him. He might be running, or he might be genuine, Clara said. But if he has additional evidence, we need it. Can you bring him in safely? I can try, but I need federal backup standing by in case this goes sideways. They arranged a meeting at an abandoned warehouse on the industrial edge of Ashford Heights, location chosen specifically for its limited access points and clear sight lines. Levi arrived 2 hours early, establishing surveillance positions and confirming federal agents were in concealed positions nearby. Ryder Maxwell appeared exactly on schedule, driving a nondescript sedan and approaching with visible nervousness. He was mid-50s, wearing casual clothes, carrying a leather briefcase. Mr. Armstrong, Maxwell said, stopping 20 feet away, as instructed. Thank you for meeting me. Show me the evidence first. Then we talk about protection. Maxwell opened his briefcase slowly, extracting a laptop and several file folders. Everything Apex has done for the past decade is documented here. I kept copies as insurance when I started realizing how far the corruption went. Clinical trial data showing we knew medications were ineffective. Emails proving executives ordered witness intimidation and possibly murder. Financial records connecting us to political bribery networks across 3 countries. Levi examined the documents while maintaining awareness of their surroundings. Everything appeared legitimate, corroborating and expanding on what Thania had already documented. This was devastating evidence that would ensure Apex's complete destruction. Why now? Levi asked. You've worked there for years. Why defect today? Maxwell's face contorted with something that might have been guilt or grief. Because I just learned that one of the medications I approved, knowing it didn't work, killed my sister last month. She trusted her doctors, trusted the medication, and died because I prioritized my career over honesty. I can't undo that, but I can make sure everyone responsible faces consequences. The words carried the ring of truth, pain too genuine to be fabricated. Levi signaled to the federal agents, who emerged from concealment, to take Maxwell into protective custody along with his evidence. You made the right choice, Levi told him as agents secured the scene. Your sister's death wasn't in vain. This evidence will save countless others. As Maxwell was transported to federal custody, Levi returned to the hotel, where Thania was monitoring news coverage. Her expression when he entered told him she'd been watching the operation through updates from Agent Jennings. We did it, Thania said, disbelief mixing with exhaustion. We actually did it. Apex is finished. Executives are arrested. And now an insider is providing additional evidence. This is everything I hoped for when I started investigating them. We're not done yet, Levi cautioned. Arrests aren't convictions, and cornered animals make final desperate moves. Stay alert until this is completely finished. But even as he said the words, Levi felt the momentum had shifted decisively in their favor. They'd gathered forces, converted an insider into an ally, and delivered evidence that would withstand any legal challenge Apex could mount. The foundation had been built. Now came the final confrontation, where justice would be delivered or denied, based on the strength of what they accomplished. The trial began 6 weeks later, in federal court, prosecution moving with unusual speed due to the overwhelming evidence and public interest. Levi sat in the gallery beside Thania, watching as 12 jurors were sworn in to determine whether Apex Biomed executives would face decades in prison for their crimes. The prosecution's case was methodical and devastating. They presented Thania's investigation, showing falsified clinical trials and bribed regulators. They presented Ryder Maxwell's insider testimony, documenting executive meetings where witness elimination was discussed casually. They presented financial records showing millions flowing to politicians and officials. And crucially, they presented families of the victims. 19 people whose loved ones had died, trusting medications that Apex knew didn't work. Their testimony transformed abstract fraud into human tragedy, making it impossible for jurors to view this as mere corporate malfeasance. The defense fought viciously. Apex's legal team attacked every witness's credibility, suggested alternative explanations for every piece of evidence, and argued that individual executives couldn't be held responsible for decisions made by collective corporate structure. But the evidence was too comprehensive, too well documented. Thania's investigation had been thorough. Maxwell's insider knowledge filled gaps, and federal investigators had seized servers containing communications that confirmed conspiracy. On the 8th day of trial, Preston Ford took the stand in his own defense. The former CEO maintained his composure, insisting he'd relied on subordinates and trusted their reporting. He claimed ignorance of falsified trials and witness intimidation, painting himself as victim of rogue employees. The prosecution's cross-examination destroyed him. They presented emails with Ford's name authorizing payments to silence whistleblowers. They showed meeting minutes where he'd personally discussed strategies to discredit investigators. They played recorded phone calls where he'd threatened people who questioned Apex's practices. By the time Ford left the witness stand, his credibility was demolished. The jury's expressions showed they'd seen through his Prydigacet, denials to the calculating criminal underneath. Closing arguments happened on day 10. The prosecution spoke for 3 hours, methodically connecting evidence to charges and demonstrating beyond reasonable doubt that Apex executives had knowingly defrauded regulators and killed patients for profit. The defense spoke for 2 hours, desperately arguing that mistakes weren't crimes and that corporate structure diffused individual culpability. Their arguments felt hollow against the mountain of evidence presented. The jury deliberated for 2 days. 2 days where Levi barely slept, knowing that everything they'd fought for came down to 12 citizens, deciding whether justice or corporate power would prevail. The verdict came on a gray afternoon that matched the tension in the courtroom. Judge Patricia Morrison called the court to order, and the jury foreman stood to deliver their decision. In the matter of United States versus Preston Ford and 11 co-defendants, we the jury find the defendants guilty on all counts. The courtroom erupted. Families of victims wept with relief. Media rushed to report the verdict, and Thania collapsed into Levi's arms. 3 years of grief and 18 months of investigation finally validated by justice delivered. Preston Ford's face went pale as reality crashed over him. Guilty on all counts meant decades in federal prison, his empire destroyed, his legacy ruined. The other executives showed similar shock, unable to process that their money and connections hadn't saved them. Judge Morrison scheduled sentencing for the following month, but remanded all defendants to custody immediately. Federal marshals led them away in chains, ending careers built on corruption and death. Outside the courthouse, Thania spoke to assembled media with composure that belied her exhaustion. Today, justice was delivered for everyone. Apex Biomed killed through their fraudulent medications. My father, Captain Nathan Foster, died investigating this corruption. The verdict today honors his sacrifice and ensures his death meant something beyond tragedy. She continued, thanking federal investigators and acknowledging the families who testified, but she didn't mention Levi, protecting his anonymity, as they'd agreed. His role in this victory would remain private, known only to those directly involved. That evening, back at the hotel, Levi called his sister to arrange Lily's return home. It's safe now. The people who threatened her are in federal custody awaiting sentencing. We can resume normal life. Define normal, Elise said with amusement, because from what I'm reading in the news, you've been involved in taking down one of the biggest corporate fraud cases in history. That's not exactly contractor work. The details are complicated. I'll explain when I see you. Can you bring Lily home this weekend? We'll be there Saturday. And Levi, whatever you did, however you were involved, I'm proud of you. Not many people have the courage to stand against that kind of power. After ending the call, Levi found Thania on the hotel room balcony, staring out at Ashford Heights with an expression of profound relief mixed with exhaustion. We won, she said as he joined her. We actually won. Apex is destroyed, executives are going to prison, and new regulations are being implemented to prevent this from happening again. Everything we fought for was accomplished. Your father would be proud, Levi said. And my Marines have justice now. Hayes, Kimura, Washington, they died exposing corruption that we finally held accountable. That matters. Thania turned to face him. What happens now? For you, I mean. Do you rebuild your house and go back to contractor work? Pretend these past 2 months didn't happen? I don't know, Levi admitted. The quiet life was built on pretending I wasn't a warrior. But this proved I can't fully leave that identity behind. Maybe I need to find middle ground. Something that honors both who I was and who I'm trying to be. I might have a suggestion, Thania said carefully. Foster Technologies is expanding into security consulting for whistleblowers and corporate investigators. People who face retaliation for exposing fraud need protection from those who know how to provide it. Someone with your skills could make a real difference in that space. Levi considered the offer. It wasn't the quiet life he'd planned, but it was purpose-driven work that used his abilities to protect innocents. It was honorable employment that wouldn't require hiding who he was. Let me think about it, he said finally. First, I need to get Lily home and rebuild what we lost. Then I can consider what comes next. They stood together in comfortable silence, two people who'd been strangers 6 weeks ago and were now bonded by shared combat against corporate evil. The victory was complete, justice delivered, and the future uncertain but filled with possibility. Below them, Ashford Heights glowed. With evening lights, a city that would never know how close it had come to losing one of its citizens to corporate violence, or how a contractor with a hidden past had emerged from shadows to ensure truth prevailed over power. The final confrontation had ended in victory, and Levi Armstrong, former Marine and current father, had proven that some men never stop being warriors. They just choose their battles carefully, and when they fight to win. 6 months after the trial, Levi stood in front of a newly constructed house on Willow Creek Drive, watching Lily chase butterflies through a yard that was slowly becoming a home. The insurance settlement from the arson had been generous, and he'd used it to build something better than what had been destroyed. The new house was larger, with a dedicated office space he hadn't needed as just a contractor. That office now contained secure communication equipment, filing cabinets with locks rated for classified materials, and a small arsenal maintained with military precision. Because Levi Armstrong wasn't just a contractor anymore. Daddy, come look at this caterpillar. Lily called from the garden, her enthusiasm infectious as always. She'd adjusted remarkably well to their temporary displacement, treating the entire experience as an adventure rather than trauma. Levi joined her, examining the caterpillar with appropriate seriousness. That's going to be a monarch butterfly eventually. Pretty impressive transformation. Like you, Lily said with the casual wisdom children sometimes possessed. You used to just build things. Now you help people and build things. The observation was more accurate than she knew. 3 months ago, Levi had accepted Thania's offer to join Foster Technologies as Director of Protective Services. His role was providing security for whistleblowers, corporate investigators, and anyone facing retaliation for exposing fraud or corruption. It wasn't the quiet life he'd originally envisioned, but it was meaningful work that used his skills to protect innocence, and it allowed him to be present for Lily while honoring the warrior identity he could no longer deny. That's right, sweetheart, Levi confirmed. People need help sometimes, and I'm good at helping them. Just like Mrs. Chambers helps you learn math, and Dr. Blake helps people feel better when they're sick. Everyone uses their skills to make the world better. Is that why the lady from TV came to visit? Lily asked, referencing Thania's visit the previous weekend. Because you help her? We help each other, Levi corrected. She's very smart about finding bad people who hurt others, and I'm good at making sure those bad people can't hurt her. While she does that work, teamwork. His phone buzzed with a message from Thania. New client consultation tomorrow. Former pharmaceutical researcher with evidence of safety violations. Looks legitimate, but potentially dangerous. Your assessment needed. Levi typed, a quick response confirming his availability, then pocketed the phone. This was his life now, balancing parenthood with protective services. Construction contracts with security consultations. It wasn't the simple existence he'd sought after leaving the Marines, but it was honest and purposeful. That evening, after Lily was asleep, Levi sat in his office reviewing case files. Foster Technologies had grown rapidly, their success with the Apex Biomed case attracting clients from across the country. Whistleblowers facing corporate retaliation, journalists investigating dangerous subjects, activists exposing environmental crimes. They all needed protection from people willing to use violence to maintain profitable secrets. And Levi provided that protection. Drawing on force recon training and hard-earned combat experience, he'd assembled a small team of former military operators, people like Alec Jennings, who understood that some skills existed specifically to defend those who couldn't defend themselves. The work was dangerous but necessary. In 6 months, they'd protected 12 clients through investigations that resulted in 4 major corporate prosecutions. Lives had been saved, criminals held accountable, and Levi had found a way to honor his fallen Marines by continuing the work they'd died doing. His phone rang. Detective Vaughn. Armstrong. Thought you'd want to know. Preston Ford was sentenced today. 40 years federal prison. No parole eligibility for 25. The other executives got similar sentences. They'll all die in prison. Good, Levi said simply. Justice delivered, finally and completely. There's something else. Ford tried to make a deal, offered to provide information about other pharmaceutical companies engaged in fraud. Federal prosecutors are following up. Your case might have opened investigations that'll span years. After ending the call, Levi felt satisfaction deeper than simple victory. The mission hadn't just succeeded, it had created ripples that would continue exposing corruption long after his direct involvement ended. That was legacy, impact that transcended individual action. A soft knock at his office door revealed Lily in her pajamas, Mr. Tumbles tucked under her arm. Can't sleep, Daddy. Bad dreams. Levi scooped her up, carrying her to the living room couch where they'd established a ritual for difficult nights. He wrapped them both in a blanket and started telling stories about brave princesses and clever dragons, narratives where good triumphed through courage and determination. As Lily drifted back to sleep against his shoulder, Levi reflected on the journey that had brought them here. He tried to leave the warrior behind, tried to be just a father and contractor. But circumstances had proven that identity couldn't be abandoned, only integrated. He was both now. Father and protector, contractor and guardian, ordinary man with extraordinary skills he used for honorable purposes. It wasn't the simple life Amanda had wanted for them, but it was good life, meaningful beyond personal comfort. Through the window, Ashford Heights glowed with evening lights, a city that would never know how many threats had been stopped before reaching its citizens. That anonymity was fine with Levi. Recognition didn't matter, results did. Lily stirred slightly, mumbling something about butterflies and adventures. Levi held her closer, this small person, who'd given him reason to survive grief and purpose beyond personal redemption. The quiet protector had found his voice. The warrior had found his mission. And Levi Armstrong, former Marine and forever father, had discovered that some transformations weren't about leaving old identities behind, but about growing large enough to contain both who you were and who you'd become. The new path stretched forward, uncertain but purposeful. There would be more clients needing protection, more battles against powerful people who thought wealth made them untouchable, more nights standing between innocents and those who'd harm them. But there would also be butterfly observations and bedtime stories, school conferences and soccer practices, the ordinary moments of fatherhood that made the extraordinary sacrifices worthwhile. That balance, that integration of warrior and father, was the legacy Levi would leave. Not medals or commendations, but the example of a man who'd used violence only to protect, who'd honored the fallen by continuing their work, and who'd proven that strength's highest purpose was defending those who couldn't defend themselves. Hayes, Kimura, and Washington would have approved. Amanda would have understood, and Lily would grow up knowing her father was exactly who he appeared to be. No lies or hidden identities. Just a man doing his best to make the world slightly safer for the people he loved and the innocents who needed champions. The mission continued. It always would. But now Levi faced it not as burden or obligation, but as chosen purpose that gave meaning to everything he'd survived and everyone he'd lost. The transformation was complete, and the future, uncertain as all futures were, held the promise of justice delivered one protected client at a time, one exposed criminal at a time, one saved life at a time. That was enough. That was everything. And Levi Armstrong, holding his sleeping daughter in a house built from ashes, was finally at peace with both who he'd been and who he'd become. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.